I would like to introduce the final speaker of the session, Jihua Hao. Jihua received his PhD from Johns Hopkins University under the supervision of Dmitry Sermigensky. He's currently a postdoc at Rutgers, working with me and Paul Fikowski, and he will talk about phosphorus and the availability of phosphorus for life. Okay, Jihua, take it away.
So good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to hopefully give an interesting end for the symposium because I'm the last presenter, I think. So I will talk about some recent works on phosphorus chemistry in planetary waters, particularly early Earth and the Enceladus Ocean water system. So this work is a collaboration with many colleagues, my previous colleagues and the current lab members. And this is an outline. So I will firstly give you some introduction on the phosphorus chemistry, and then I will talk about the phosphorus in the early Earth and Enceladus. Phosphorus is a very interesting element. I think most of the people agree that phosphorus is a bio-limiting nutrient, at least for a long time scale. So it is very redoxing sensitive under ambient conditions. By saying redoxing sensitive, it means that thermodynamically only also phosphate, as shown in the red figure, is stable. But biology can form those reducing phosphorus, but they are not stable on the long-term time scale. And phosphorus has no stable gaseous phase, and generally phosphorus is locked in rocks because of the low solubility of the phosphate monomers combining several divalent metal cations. So the current phosphorus cycle on the Earth is composed of two parts mainly. One part is on the land, basically the continental weathering as the dominant source of the phosphorus to the ocean. And then in the ocean, the major part came from for the photic zone biology actually came from the recycling, which is shown here as a remineralization. And both of these two important processes depend on various kinds of environmental factors. For example, the weathering depends on the rock composition, the land area, the climate, the vegetation, the water chemistry on the land, and also the atmosphere chemistry. And the recycling is mainly dependent on the availability of the oxidants and also microbial activities and also upwelling delivery. So I will firstly talk about the early Earth phosphorus cycle, and I will discuss about difference between early Earth and modern Earth. The early Earth is kind of very different from the modern Earth in terms of the continental sightings. As shown here, the red figure shows that the x-axis is the time, y-axis is the land fraction relative to the modern. And you can see that the two solid lines shows I think most of the people agreed growth of the emergence of the land. So basically the land starts to substantially emerge from the middle to the late Archean time. And the red figure shows that it's actually to compensate the low solar activity and also because of the lower smaller land, you will have a lot of carbon dioxide accumulated in the atmosphere. So it basically showed the Archean Earth has a smaller land but a more acidic atmosphere. So I consider these two important factors with a kinetic weathering model shown here in the right. So and then I calculated the phosphorus weathering flux in terms of the in the early Earth in terms relative to the modern Earth. As you can see that with the emergence of the land starting from the middle to the late Archean, the phosphorus delivery flux can rapidly increase to a level that is comparable to the modern level. So although a lot of phosphorus can be delivered after the middle Archean, the early Earth seawater is enriched in a lot of divalent metals, for example, calcium and ferrous iron. As shown here in the left figure, when you have ferrous iron, the solubility of this mineral called vivinite is a ferrous phosphate mineral. Has a very, very low solubility. So it may indicate that if you have some phosphate in the early seawater, it may be precipitated out as a vivinite or other kind of minerals. So it means that the early seawater is poor in dissolved phosphate. As I mentioned before, another important process for the photic zone biology is from the recycling of the phosphorus. So the recycling of the phosphorus in the modern day, showing here as the star, a blue star, is very, very efficient. So it's basically, I think more than 99% of the phosphate for the photic zone biology came from the recycling in the water column. However, in the early Earth, since you don't have so much oxidant, the seawater is poor in sulfate and the atmosphere is poor in oxygen. So the recycling efficiency is thought to be limited. So right here, I show the upper limit by the modern anoxic environment, the recycling efficiency, as an upper limit for the Archean. And then I calculated the recycling amount of the phosphorus, and it showed that in the Archean, basically it showed the higher relative importance of the continental weathering delivery for the total phosphate for the photic zone biology. So combining the continental weathering and the phosphorus from the recycling, I reconstructed the total phosphorus for the photic zone biology with time in the Archean. As you can see, in the early Archean, there is a very, very low net primary productivity and limited by the phosphorus. And with the emergence of the land in the middle Archean, the net primary productivity limited by the phosphorus will increase rapidly, and until to the later Archean, it can reach up to 10% of the modern level. So it has pretty important implication for the oxidation of the atmosphere in the end of the Archean. This is a modeling work by the Caltech group, showing the x-axis is the time scale for the cyanobacteria to fully oxidize the atmosphere, and the y-axis is showing the concentration of the reductants relative to the oxygen. As you can see, this model is run at 10% net primary production, which can be supported by the phosphorus delivery, as I showed earlier. And so if that's the case, then our increasing phosphorus work can support quick oxidation of the atmosphere by the cyanobacteria in the end of the Archean. Then I will discuss, that's about the early Earth. So I will discuss some most recent works about the phosphorus in the Enceladus Ocean water. So Enceladus has a very interesting subsurface ocean, and it is very, very different from the Earth. Firstly, it has no continental land, so no continental weathering, and it has no evidence of abundant life. So there's no biology, but no vegetation to facilitate the phosphorus weathering. And the ocean is covered by the thick ice. So it's totally isolated from the, not totally, but mainly isolated to the outer space. And the subsurface ocean is shown to last for at least 100 million years or even to several billion years. So in that long time scale, the seawater may reach some kind of equilibrium with the seafloor. And the Enceladus Ocean water chemistry we got from some missions and the modeling reconstruction shows that the global seawater is basically alkaline and reducing and carbonate rich with the pH around about 8.5 to 11. So in such seawater, I calculated the phosphate solubility, and with different kinds of scenario environmental sightings showing here, like high CO2 or low CO2 or normal nitrogen abundance or high nitrogen abundance or low nitrogen abundance. So I did a lot of this sensitivity test, but basically all of these tests suggest overall higher concentration of phosphate in the Enceladus seawater than the modern Earth seawater. And this is two different scenarios because we don't know much about the fluorine chemistry in the seawater, and fluorine is very important for the phosphorus solubility. So I calculated one is without fluorine, one is with substantial levels of fluorine as a conservative estimate. But you can see even in the worst condition for the phosphorus solubility, it will also support close to higher levels of phosphate in the Enceladus seawater. And to understand why the high pH seawater can support high phosphate, I did the sensitivity test with carbonate, and it shows that with the DIC is a total dissolved inorganic carbon. So with the increasing DIC number, it showed a linear correlation with the log total solubility of the phosphate. So it means that the high carbonate allows high levels of phosphate. It's actually quite easy to understand because when you have an increasing high dissolved inorganic carbon at high pH, it will suppress the solubility of the various kinds of divalent cations, which will instead will otherwise form precipitated with phosphate. So the calculation, the modeling work, is very, very consistent with the observation of the modern Earth's alkaline lake water chemistry by showing here the similar correlation between the bicarbonate level or the dissolved inorganic carbon level with the total dissolved phosphate. And another issue is that at this such high pH, given the long time scale, can we actually can the seafloor weathering release such amount of phosphate in the Enceladus? So I did some very simple kinetic dissolution calculation showing here the x-axis is the pH of the seawater, y-axis is the time scale to reach 10 micromolar phosphate, which is 10 times of the modern, or 10 times or 100 times of the modern seawater on the Earth. As you can see that within a reasonable time scale relative to comparable to the history of the Enceladus seawater, it actually dissolution of the chondritic phosphate minerals can support such high concentration of dissolved phosphorus than the modern Earth seawater. So this is basically what I want to show you very quickly, and I will give a quick summary. And the first is I show that increasing continental input of phosphorus along with the emergence of the land in the middle or late Archean. And I further show that low but increasing net primary productivity limited mainly by the availability of the phosphorus in the Archean. And then late Archean net primary productivity allows rapid oxidation of the atmosphere by cyanobacteria after the emergence of the occurrence of the oxygenic photosynthesis. And the high levels of dissolved phosphate in the carbonate-rich Enceladus Ocean water, mainly due to the high carbonate levels. So the future work and also ongoing work is actually to understand the water chemistry, the broad water chemistry, including the transition metals and other like sulfur in the planetary oceans. So as you can see, the Enceladus and recently Europa also showed a subsurface seawater, and also maybe the early Mars is also very interesting for the astrobiological interest. And Titan, for example, is a very reducing environment. So hopefully that I can compare my modeling studies with the data collected by the NASA missions, which will go to Europa, Titan, or hopefully Enceladus in the future. So with that, I will acknowledge my current institution and my postdoc funding, and thank you.